Okie dokie, ho ho! Let's go!
Hey guys, it's Retrohead here. Welcome back to another video. Today I have a little bit of a different video for you, as today, the 22nd of November 2024, marks 30 years of the Sega Saturn. Now this was the Japanese release of the Sega Saturn, not in the UK or the US or anything like that. Released in Japan exactly 30 years ago today, which is really exciting. And I really wanted to do a little video just commemorating this milestone, as I think the Sega Saturn was such an underrated games console that more people need to know about and collect for. Now, if you're not familiar with the channel, I collect for Nintendo, PlayStation and Atari, and Sega stuff is what my dad collects for. He collects for exclusively boxed complete Sega games. But I also really enjoy playing Sega games, so I'm really looking forward to doing this video, as again, the Saturn is just a console not many people bought back in the day, not many people know about it, not really many people talk about it now, even retro gaming being as big as it is. So I really want to do this video just showing the Sega Saturn a little bit of love, because I think it really deserves more of it. So first of all, I'll do a little bit of history about the Sega Saturn, then what are bits that I like about it and like playing it, and at the end I'll show you my dad's entire Sega Saturn collection. So he's got some really good games now, as it's one of his favourite consoles to collect for. But now, let's talk all things about the Sega Saturn. Now obviously, as we know, the main competitor to the Sega Saturn was the PS1, and the PS1 absolutely dominated the console market, being the first console to ever reach over 100 million units sold, and that was really doomed to the Sega Saturn, because the Sega Saturn only sold 9 million units. Now obviously there's different speculations as to why this happened, but part of the reason why I thought it happened is the Saturn originally cost £189.99, which is equivalent to over £500 now, which is pretty expensive for a games console, and especially back then. That price just seems a little bit higher than what people were willing to pay, I think. And Sega were obviously trying to follow up the success of the Mega Drive, which obviously didn't end up happening. But Sony, when they brought out the PS1, they had the advantage of it being made by Sony. And obviously at the time they hadn't made game consoles before, but Sony were already a very trusted brand for any sort of electronics, TVs, you know, speakers, VHS, DVD, that sort of thing. Sony were already very well established brand, whereas Sega, they had a couple of successful game consoles, but hadn't done much before that. But with more and more people every year getting into retro collecting, I don't know why the Sega Saturn isn't really getting talked about much, because obviously years and years ago when retro collecting wasn't as much of a thing, the PS1 wasn't getting talked about much, but the PS1 is now talked about a lot with some of the great games like Crash Bandicoot, Gran Turismo, Metal Gear and stuff like that. But not many people are talking about the Sega Saturn, which to me is absolutely crazy. It's a great system, and that's sort of why I wanted to make this video, just to sort of show the Sega Saturn a little bit more love, as I think the Sega Saturn was such an underrated console, and is still underrated now. And it's not even like a lot of the great Saturn games were released on all different consoles. A lot of the games that people and me consider the great Saturn games are really like not on any other consoles. A lot of them are Saturn exclusives, but people just don't seem to be bothered about playing them, which I really don't know why. But this is sort of why I wanted to make it again, just to make it a little bit more aware and to maybe inspire people to start playing the Saturn a little bit more. So that's enough talking. Now I'm going to show you his entire Sega Saturn collection. So now I'll show you his collection. At the end I'll do like accessories and stuff that he's got for us. He's got quite a few accessories. But first of all I'll show you all the games. So the first one is one that I've mentioned quite a bit already in this video, and that is Sega Rally. As I've said, this was the first ever Sega Saturn game we got with a Sega Saturn for $99.99 from HMV back in the day. And this is just such a good game. I mean, I've played this hundreds and hundreds of times. He's probably played this billions of times. And it's just such a good racing game. The controls are really tight even today. The cars look awesome. And I think for a 32-bit console, this game is aged really well. So Sega Rally is definitely a good one to grab if you collect for the Sega Saturn. So yeah, Sega Rally is a great one to start our list. From one awesome racing game to another awesome racing game, we have Virtua Racing. Now this is again such a good racing game. I've not personally played this one overly much, so I can't say much about it. I've played more of the Mega Drive Virtua Racing, which again is an incredible game. But I have played a little bit of the Saturn one, and it's really good. And I don't know whether it's just my opinion or whether like it's actually sort of true, but I think the Saturn graphics have aged so well. I really like sort of like polygon shapes. I just think some of these Saturn games have aged really well. Let me know in the comments if you think that as well. But yeah, Virtua Racing, absolutely incredible game. Not a cheap one, but not an expensive one at the same time. Next up, we have True Pinball. Now this is one that I really enjoy playing, as I absolutely love pinball. Obviously I prefer it on like a real machine, but I do really like pinball games, so I have quite a few in my collection. I think my dad might have a couple more on other Sega consoles, I'm not quite sure. But really do like pinball games, and True Pinball is really good as well. Next up, we have Athlete Kings. Now, this is a really good one in my opinion. I absolutely love like Olympic games and like sports games like this because you get all sorts of different sports. Like, I don't get me wrong, I like FIFA games and stuff like that, but I do like games where you get lots of different sports in one. So this is one that I really enjoy as well. I'm going to go a little bit rapid fire on the next few games because there's some absolutely incredible games that I want to show you at the end. And these ones are ones that I haven't really played, so I don't really know what to say about them. Obviously, I can imagine what they're like games like Olympic soccer. You know what it's going to be like, really. But we have another soccer game, and that is Actua Soccer. That one I think I have actually played, but I can't really remember what it was like. Can't have been very memorable. Next up, we have Actua Golf. Don't think I've ever played that one. Let me know if you've played any of these in the comments, if I'm missing out particularly. And the other one, I definitely have played this one. Worldwide Soccer 97. The next game is one of my most favourite Saturn games and one that I definitely think more people need to talk about, and that is Virtua Fighter. Now this is a very controversial opinion, but for me, this is up there with Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. This game is just so good and no one talks about it. I think it's probably because it is on the Saturn, not many people have Saturns to play it on and all that, and it's not a very common game, but this game is just so good. Like, more people have to talk about it. If you've got a Saturn and don't own this game, you have to get it. I think you could probably get a copy of this for under a tenner as well. So it's not a very expensive one, but one that you need to try out. Because for me, this is up there with some of the great fighting games of all time. And the same goes for Virtua Fighter 2. Not quite as good as the original in my opinion, but still an awesome game. And again, a really cheap one. Like, this is criminally cheap. I think you can get a copy of this for like £5 to £10. And for a game this good, a really worthwhile pick up. Next up, we have a game that I know absolutely zero about, and I don't really know what to say about it. And that is Firestorm Thunderhawk 2. Now, I don't know if he's ever played this one. I definitely have never played this one. But yeah, no idea if this is any good or not. You'll have to let me know in the comments down below. Next up, we have two games that involve quite a bit of strategy, but are both really fun. So the first one is Command and Conquer, and the second one is Worms. I'm not overly into Command and Conquer, found it quite fun, but not particularly. But Worms is a really fun game. This one's quite fun, this one's very fun, I'd say. Worms is absolutely awesome. I've got it on the PS1. I think I've got it on quite a few consoles now. My dad also owns it on the Sega Saturn. Next up, we have NBA Live 97. Now, I really enjoy basketball games. Basketball is a sport that I really like watching and playing as well. So this is a really good little game and another nice cheap one to pick up if you're collecting for the Saturn. Next up is another one that I've never played, and that is High Octane. So again, I'll read you a little bit on the back on this one. Dive into death in High Octane, the high-intensity arcade-style combat racing game. 2-player split-screen mode, 9 different tracks to race, single, championship, clone and death match races. Take any route you like in the fastest time. So this sounds like a really good game, and one that I'm sure we'll play very soon. Next up, we have a game that you really don't see very often on the Saturn, and one that I really enjoyed, and that is NASCAR 98. As you might be able to tell if you're not familiar with the channel already, I absolutely love racing games, like all racing games, so this is one in his collection that I've played quite a lot and it's really good. But not as good as a certain other NASCAR game on the Saturn. I'm sure you can't imagine which one I'm thinking of though. Moving on to another awesome racing game, we have Andretti Racing. Now, I'm sure this is awesome on the Saturn. I've never played it on the Saturn, but I've got it on the PS1, and I'm sure they're going to be quite similar. It's really good how it's got two different race styles. It's got Indy cars and stock cars, which is really cool. Like, to have, there's basically two different games in one game. So yeah, a really good game to have in your Saturn collection. And the other NASCAR game that I was talking about is Daytona on the Sega Saturn. One of the best games ever released for the Sega Saturn. This is so iconic. From down to the racing, the graphics, the music, everything about it is just absolutely incredible. And I think this in CEX is about 15 quid, like complete in box. Not 100% sure, but I cannot like ask you to pick this up more if you've got a Saturn. This could not come highly rated enough from me. Like, just an absolutely incredible game and one that you need to have in your Sega Saturn collection. Next up, we have Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition. Very similar to the original Daytona. I didn't enjoy it quite so much. I think it's just because I love the original so much. But still a really good racing game. Next up, we have an awesome Saturn game, and that is Sonic Jam. Now, this is a really good disc to have as well, because I'll tell you some of the games it includes on the back. It includes Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3, 2, and 1, obviously, and also, obviously, Sonic Jam. This is an absolutely awesome disc to have in your collection just because it's so good to have all of these games on multiple systems. And Sonic Jam is a really good game to have as well. Look at the artwork on the front as well. Moving on nicely from Sonic Jam, we have Sonic R. This is a really good racing game. It's a Sonic and all of his friends, obviously, running game. but it goes like so quick. It's so good. Obviously, Sonic is a very speedy hedgehog. So is his friends as well on this game. It's really good. It's a little bit different from just racing car games. This makes it like have a little bit of a twist on it. Not a cheap game, but definitely one that's worthy to pick up in your Saturn collection if you see it for the right price. Next up, and I don't really say this very often on this list, but a game that I couldn't really get on with very well, and that is Sega Touring Car Championship. Now, I absolutely love the touring cars, watch them religiously on the telly and have quite a few touring car games. We need a new touring car game as well, that'd be really cool. But Sega Touring Car Championship, the controls, I don't know if other people found this, but I found the controls so difficult. I mean, you slightly turn and you just go straight off the track. And I really enjoy racing games, so yeah, I did not overly get on with this one. And I think this one is about 15 to 20 quid, so not one that I'd overly recommend picking up. But if you fancy a challenge, perhaps you'll enjoy this one. Next up, we have a really good game on the Saturn, but also a good game on other consoles as well, and that is Soviet Strike. Now, this is another one of these thicker cases, and I'm not actually sure why, because it's not like a 2-disc game or anything like that. So yeah, I don't really know why it has that, but Soviet Strike is a really good game. I think this is also on the Mega Drive as well, along with like Desert Strike, Jungle Strike and stuff, and I really enjoy all of those games. I think the graphics on this one on the Saturn have held up really well, and this is like a really cool and relatively common one to pick up. So one that I definitely recommend keeping your eyes open for. Now this next one is one that I've never played, and that is Dark Light Conflict. But the reason this one sticks out to me is I picked this up for him and picked up in a CEX for him when I went in absolutely ages ago. But the reason this sticks out to me in my memory is I didn't even notice this at the time. I only noticed it when I got home. But this game is a 1-disc game, but it comes in a case with two spindles, so you can put 2 discs in. I'm not sure why. So you have the Dark Light Conflict disc there, but also a disc for Independence Day, the video game, just came free inside. That was really random. They obviously, someone had just put it in there when they were changing the disc in their console, and left it in there and traded it in CEX. So whoever left that in there, thank you very much. Next up, we have a Saturn game that is really high in my favourite Saturn games as well, and that is Clockwork Knight. Now, I showed this in my last video, a very recent pickup of his, and we have played this, and it is such a good platformer. This is another one that I could not recommend enough. He paid 20 quid for this complete in box from CEX, and I think that is an absolute bargain. One that I definitely think you should pick up if you have a Saturn collection as well. And again, I just think the graphics, you were seeing gameplay footage now, I think the graphics on this have literally aged so well. I still think this looks really bright, really vibrant, and a game that I definitely think that you need to play if you enjoy platformers. Next up is a Saturn game that you do see quite often, and that is Sega Ages Volume 1. And this is a really good compilation of older games. But I'm not going to like list loads of games off here for you. I'm just going to say that this includes Outrun. So for the around £30 price tag, it has to be worth it. Next up is just a couple more that I've never played. So we have World Series Baseball, but that does look like a pretty good game, so have searched up some gameplay. And the next one is quite cool because, well, it's International Victory Goal, which isn't the coolest game, but any Saturn game is cool. But the main thing is, this includes the 99p bog off deal that they did at Game Station. So it's buy one, get one free at 99p. So you'd basically be paying just under 50p each for Saturn games. And I've never actually had the joy of going into a Game Station. Obviously, you're never going to get that now, but my dad always said that it included like GameCube games, PS2, original Xbox, Sega Saturn obviously, and just all sorts. 50p each, like crazy to look back on. Next up, we have a really good F1 game, and that is F1 Challenge on the Sega Saturn. This is a really good one. Quite an expensive game. Like, I think this is sort of like more expensive than you'd think it is, but if you like F1, a definite pickup. The next game is one of the first games I think of when I think of the Sega Saturn, and that is Manx TT Superbike. Now, back when I started my channel, like about a year ago, I put a poll on my channel of what's your favourite Saturn game between Manx TT Superbike, Daytona, Sega Rally, and there might have been one more, that might have just been 3, I'm not sure. But quite a few people voted for the other 2. No one voted for Manx TT Superbike. And this game is just one that you never hear people talking about, but I think it's an absolutely awesome game. And moving on, we have another really awesome motorbike game, and that is Hang On GP 96. Not quite as good as Manx TT in my opinion, but this is still a very good motorbike racing game. Next up, we have a one-on-one fighter on the Saturn, and that is Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Now, this is a great one-on-one fighter, all the Mortal Kombat games are, but this is a sort of medium-tier Mortal Kombat game to me. I prefer Virtua Fighter to this one. That just shows like how good Virtua Fighter is in my opinion, because this is a really good game. One that is relatively expensive, but still I would say worth a pick up if you can find it for a good price. As you can see, there's a little bit of whitening on the edge. I think this was bought from CEX quite a while ago. But yeah, a really, really good one on Fighter, but not as good as Virtua Fighter in my opinion. Next up, we have Steel Slope Sliders. Again, one that you don't see very often, and a really good snowboarding game. Never going to be as good as like SSX or nothing like that, but still a good game in its own right. And the other one is Independence Day, the video game. One that I've played on the PS1, but never played on the Sega Saturn. And I've never even seen the film either, so not really much to say about this one. Next up, we have quite a common Sega Saturn game, and one that I wouldn't say that I really liked, but didn't dislike at the same time, and that is Hardcore 4x4. This game is alright, it's just quite simple. I think the graphics are a little bit more simple compared to other Saturn games, and just one that I'm not quite as keen on as the others. Next up, we have one that I thought was really, really good, and that is Crime Wave on the Sega Saturn. Now, I'll just read you a sentence on the back, and this, like, really makes you want to pick this up. Crime Wave is a fantastic driving-based shoot-'em-up. I mean, that's all you need to know. That sounds awesome, and it really is. Next up, we have Victory Boxing. This is a really good Saturn game. I think the graphics on this one have held up really, really well. And one that I thought the controls were, like, really, really tight and really, really responsive. One that I definitely recommend if you haven't got in your Saturn collection at the minute. Next one is one that's a little bit more interesting than just like your average car racing game, and that is Formula Karts. Just racing around in these little karts is really, really fun. Now, this one says it's Formula Karts Special Edition. I'm not actually sure what makes it special. You have to let me know in the comments down below if you know what actually makes it special. But it's definitely a really fun little game. Next up, we have a game that I've got on the Super Nintendo and really enjoyed it, but never played it on the Sega Saturn, and that is Theme Park. Just an absolutely iconic game, and one that I think most people have in their collection on some sort of console. And the final game is a super iconic one that like I cannot recommend enough, and is not overly expensive, and that is the original Wipeout. Now, this is not one that I've got on the PS1. I think it's Wipeout 2097 I've got. So I really need to pick that up. But I have played this on the Sega Saturn, and what more needs to be said? It's Wipeout. It's so, so good. So now I'll show you the other Saturn-related stuff he's got. So obviously he's got his boxed console here. This is not his original one. He still has got his original Saturn, but it's actually broken now. The laser on it has gone. It doesn't read discs very well. Sometimes if you like press on top of it quite hard, or like put a few books on top of it, it might work, but not really. Complete and box Sega Saturn. This was a CEX lottery. So like through the post, and you don't know what the condition's going to be like, but this is surprisingly good. Next up is something that you really don't see very often, and that is a boxed Sega Saturn controller. But this looks really, really good displayed with the original console. And another thing that I haven't really said on this video yet is how much I like the Sega Saturn branding. I mean, the back of this box is like a pencil-drawn version of it. I just think this is such a cool and still pretty modern looking box. The next one is random but still pretty cool, and that is a complete in box Sega Saturn RF unit, just so you can switch out the picture quality a little bit. But this is just a really nice thing to have in the box. I mean, how often do you see this sort of thing complete in the box? Next up, we have Virtua Cop with the light gun complete in box on the Sega Saturn, and he also obviously has it in the with the game as well. A really, really good shooting game. One that I think doesn't quite rival Time Crisis, but one of the only ones for me that comes close. And this box is also absolutely awesome. Again, with like the pencil drawn logo on the back of the gun. Just a really, really cool looking box. And the final thing is this complete in box Sega Saturn steering wheel. Now this is a really, really awesome thing to have for those good racing games like Daytona and F1 and stuff. And this is a really, really big box. But for the age of it, not in too bad condition. And again, I just love the branding on this Sega Saturn stuff. It's just so, so cool. Let me know down in the comments if you agree as well. So thank you for watching this video on 30 years of the Sega Saturn. A console that I really, really think is very underrated and more people need to talk about it. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to my channel Retrohead if you like all retro things, gaming, toys and everything like that. And also, if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye!